I get a lot of questions like these. And while these are three very different questions, there is something similar. Can you guess what? Each of these questions asks about something specific to your situation, your emotions, or your child. So while these questions are different, my initial answer is the same. You may need a formal evaluation for ADHD. I can give my thoughts and tips, and you might need an answer that's specific for your family. So in this video, I'll talk about the important benefits of a comprehensive ADHD evaluation and tell you about your options to get one and what to do if you can't. So let's jump right in. The first thing I tell parents about an ADHD evaluation is that it'll help them learn in detail about their child's unique strengths and what's truly hard for them. And an evaluation helps you better understand who your child is and what they need, allowing you to tailor the support your family gets, which in the end makes it all feel less overwhelming because you'll have a plan and know how your child and their brain work best. So if you're feeling like you're not sure what kind of support your child really needs, or that there's just too much advice to know where to start, a comprehensive evaluation for ADHD can help sort that out. But how exactly will it do that? Well, it includes many different things. Taking a complete history, standardized tests for things like attention, impulse control, and working memory, observing a child's behavior during the evaluation and sometimes in school, and symptom questionnaires for the child, parents, and usually teachers. Then the provider puts together all of that information and data and draws conclusions about what's really going on for your child. And this goes beyond what your child can just tell you or what you can easily observe. Not only will you get information on how ADHD affects your child specifically, but you'll also learn about how they process and understand information, different sensory sensitivities like an environment that's too distracting or uncomfortable, academic material that's too challenging or too boring, fine motor skill problems that make writing hard, or how their emotions affect things they need and want to do. You'll really get a full picture of how ADHD and other related problems are affecting your child. And then your provider will give you recommendations and resources that are specific to your child's needs. And this brings me to the next thing I tell parents about an ADHD evaluation. Making individualized adaptations and accommodations, especially when it comes to learning and school, is really important for kids with ADHD. And an evaluation helps you to know what those should be. As you can imagine, ADHD and the problems commonly related to it affect how kids learn and behave at school. But how exactly that plays out can be different for every kid. Why homework is hard for one child could be very different than why it's hard for another child, even when both have ADHD. The other thing, which is unfortunate and I hope changes more in the future, is that our world, especially schools, are not typically set up well for neurodiversity and kids with ADHD. And kids spend so much of their childhood learning and at school. But if that way of learning doesn't match what works for your child's brain and body, it can cause real problems like 20,000 more negative comments kinds of problems that I mentioned in another video. And this idea that our society and schools are generally not as ADHD friendly by default leads me to a powerful benefit of an ADHD evaluation. But before I tell you about that, if you're finding this video helpful so far, I'd really appreciate it if you go ahead and tap the like button and subscribe. It'll help it spread to more families who need it, and it lets me know what kind of information you all are interested in. So one of the most powerful benefits of a comprehensive evaluation is that it gives you a concrete way to advocate for your child's specific needs. Sometimes because of stigma or lack of resources or misinformation, it can be tough to get your child the support they deserve. Being able to say, here's the data that describes exactly what they need can be really helpful. At the same time, I've talked with many parents who have fears like this, and I do understand this worry. The stigma and misunderstandings that sadly still exist can sometimes make it hard to know what will happen if others know your child has ADHD. We all just want what's best for our kids, and we want to protect them. However, I would also argue that without a diagnosis, there can be even more misunderstanding about them and even more trouble getting them the support that would ultimately help them feel more successful. I also think naming the things that are genuinely hard as a part of the ADHD takes away shame by giving an explanation for why certain things seem hard. Instead of a child who develops a view of themselves as lazy or spacey because of feedback they get from others or conclusions they draw about themselves, you'll have a child who knows who they are and how their brain works best. And eventually, that official diagnosis gives them a tangible reason to advocate for themselves for support and accommodations they deserve to. The other thing to keep in mind is that a medical diagnosis is confidential. You and your child choose who and when to share it. So how do you go about getting an evaluation or a diagnosis for ADHD? Who can do a comprehensive evaluation, and what can you do if you don't have access to that or the ability to get one? Typically, a comprehensive ADHD evaluation is completed by a neuropsychologist, but a clinical psychologist or an educational psychologist might also be qualified depending on their training. If a comprehensive evaluation isn't possible, then the easiest person to get an actual diagnosis for ADHD is probably your family's medical doctor or your child's pediatrician. They can determine if a child meets formal criteria for ADHD and make recommendations based on their diagnosis. A child psychiatrist or a neurologist or a psychiatric nurse practitioner can also make a diagnosis. Another type of provider who can diagnose ADHD is a psychologist or a social worker or a master's level therapist who provides mental health counseling for ADHD. The biggest difference between any of these diagnostic evaluations and a comprehensive evaluation for ADHD is that they are not typically including standardized tests to measure different strengths and challenges. So they're basing their diagnosis on observation, questionnaires, and an interview of symptoms. Also, because learning is such a huge part of kids' lives, schools and teachers can be a great resource for better understanding your child's ADHD. School psychologists can evaluate for how ADHD impacts your child at school through some testing and make recommendations for how your child learns best. But keep in mind that while support at school is important for kids with ADHD, schools cannot provide a medical diagnosis of ADHD. I know getting a comprehensive evaluation is not always easy. Waitlists can be long, and there are just not as many providers that do these evaluations. There are real barriers to access the support you and your child deserve. Like, sometimes even when you have an idea about what you need, it's tough to get it. So I want you to also remember one very important thing. You are exactly what your child needs right now. You are strong and you can do this even when it's hard. First and foremost, they need you as that loving and caring parent to see them as they are, to love them, and to value them no matter what. I know there can be a lot of options and recommendations to sift through when it comes to kids and ADHD, whether that's from an evaluation or just from advice you find online, and it can be truly overwhelming. So I've got all the most important ideas laid out in a comprehensive video guide that talks about what I would do if my child were diagnosed with ADHD. In this video, I go through how to set up your home and family in ways that are ADHD friendly, ideas for how to deal with really big emotions, and how to have that close relationship with your child, even when things are hard and frustrating. So I really recommend you go check that out next. See you there.